Welcome to something else entirely, where we center the weird so we may grow stronger in spirit.
Welcome back, my friends. Today on the show, we have my neighbor, Martin. So a little background on Martin. He is a retired firefighter, so real life hero we've got on the show here today. And he is very scientifically minded. He spent most of his free time during his career as a firefighter working on inventions in his garage. So really has that engineering mind, and invented the flying floppy disk for dogs, which is actually a very delightful invention. If you want to check that out, they're like a frisbee but floppy, so that dogs can catch them and they fly and they're soft. It's a great thing. And as you know, in the spirit of the show, I've been wandering around asking people about their weirdest experiences, especially the ones we don't usually talk about because we're all so worried about what other people are going to think if we tell them how weird we are. And so I was asking Martin about this, and he's casually mentioned that he had taken animal communication classes. And so I stopped him mid-sentence and said, in his backyard, stopped him and said, wait, we have to record this right now. And so this is a conversation with my neighbor Martin in his backyard. I hope you enjoy it. Whew. Okay. Hi, everybody. Come in, say hi.
Hey,
this is my neighbor
going?
Martin. And so, as you know, I'm going around asking everybody about their weirdest experiences. Mm-hmm. And I happen to know from previous interactions with Martin that you have had some experiences with communicating with animals. What was that like, or where did you learn to do that? Or?
Well, we originally started communicating with animals to help our own dogs. Uh-huh. So we hired a communicator and so forth, and I became really interested in what they were capable of doing.
So when you say you hired a communicator,
right? Yes.
What is that?
So there are some people that are just really good at it. Uh-huh. So they will help you communicate with your animals. So you bring them to your home or whatever, and they'll work with your animal and talk about what they're feeling, and if one of your dogs die and they want to know what the other dog feels like, or if they have strange pains and so forth that you can't figure out, they can work with you to try to figure out those things. So I became really interested in it. Yes, little girl.
We've got here. Let's give her a cameo. Ready?
Here we go. Here's little Murphy. There we
go. For those who just have the audio, that's my dog.
Yeah. So anyway, I became really interesting, and I actually took some animal communication classes.
Oh.
Yeah. So it was really, really interesting. And within the class, you get to work with the instructor, who's really good. Uh-huh. Plus, you get to work with all the other students in the class, and you get to see what they're capable of. And the interesting thing is, everybody thinks that for like animal communication, that they're just kind of, they have a technique where they're really intuitive and they just ask simple questions and they kind of give generic answers, and so that it's like it could be correct no matter what. But that's not really true, because whenever somebody would come into the class to have us as students read their animal, they're sitting there, so they know everything about the animal or the dog, and so when we would start trying to read the dog, and we would start saying things that the owners would go, and specific things like names, and so forth. The owner would go, that's correct. So weird. So not only did I get to try to.
So people, just to clarify so people were bringing in their pets. Mm-hmm. They knew everything about the pet, and then you guys as students are attempting to essentially psychically or telepathically, empathically, whichever word you're most comfortable with, non-verbally,
right,
communicate with the animals and or gather information about them. And so you got things like their names.
Yeah, names of people, specific things like how they grew up, other like names that they were like names that you call the animal.
Yeah, and they would, like pet names.
Pet names. They would come up with those. It's just like, that's not something that you can just make up,
No, and especially if you're watching other people do it, so you're watching strangers do this with animals where that owner of the animal is also a stranger. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
so
I
the-
mean, in science, that's sort of like the equivalent of triple blind.
Okay.
Like you don't know the person who's doing the reading. They don't know the person whose dog it is.
Right.
Right. And so I'm sure it was not intended that way, but as
Yeah.
a scientist, that's actually a pretty good
kinda
setup
nice.
to
Now,
say,
sometimes
you know,
the
because
instructor
it'd be weird if
organizes like for the students. This is for a class, you know. So the instructor organizes these dogs to come through, and sometimes the instructor knows the story, you know, but they don't reveal anything. So just blind, this dog comes into a room of 8 students who are taking the class.
Wow.
And then what's really interesting about it is that not the same person doesn't get a hit on the animal every time. So one person will just light up and just start saying things and communicating, and the owner's going, "Wow, that's really creepy." But yes, that's correct, you know. And the rest of the people are like, "I got nothing."
Yeah. And
know?
so you can, when you say lights up, do you feel like you can kind of see it or know when the person has a reading, for lack of a better word? You know, if there's one dog and there's many students sitting
Right.
there, and what is that like? Or did it happen to you?
Well, oddly enough, it's like I really didn't have much luck with any of them.
Yeah.
But then this one dog came in, and I just felt connected to it, you know, and it kind of had an aura around it. Really weird.
Like something you could feel or see, or what do you mean by that?
You know, you can sense an aura. It feels like you see it, but you really don't.
Yes,
you know?
I do know.
Yeah. Okay. But anyway, so it kind of had an aura around it, and I just felt, you know, connected to it, and I started just kind of saying things about it and its background and how it grew up and so forth, and the owner's going, "Yes, that's correct, you know. And I was really kind of oblivious to the world while the whole thing was going on. I just was just looking and just kind of feeling the dog. And then I kept going, and then finally, when I kind of came back around, the dog was standing like on my lap, looking right in my face.
So you had your eyes closed.
Kind of just,
Yeah,
I was looking at him, but I wasn't looking at him. You know?
I do.
It was really strange. And then everybody in the class was going, "Oh my gosh, you've got it. You got it. You've got the sixth sense." And I'm like, "Oh." And of course, then I couldn't read anything on any other dogs after that.
Yeah. You know, that's okay. Well, I have a question first.
Sure.
Where do you think the information comes from? Right? So it happened to you one time.
Right.
You saw it happen to other people.
Right.
And these are people who've never met these dogs before.
That's correct.
So where do you think the information is coming from?
That's the thing, is I like to think, you know, I have scientific background and so forth, but sometimes you see things that you just simply can't explain.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed experiencing and observing it, because I simply could not explain how it was happening. But yet at the same time, they were doing these remarkable things in front of me. And if you see this happen at this scale, and then at the same time your instructor or whatever is also doing things like taking readings from photographs and communicating what the animal's feeling by looking at a photograph and connecting with the animal that way. It's just like, and then this person who's you've seen them do incredible things, and they're credible to you. They're connecting with animals that are already dead, you know, and how they're doing and how their spirit's reborn and what's going on with them and so forth. And so it's like if this is real, then all this other stuff is real.
Right. Yeah. Hang on. I'm gonna pause for the car, and then we're gonna scoot in because I want to make sure we're getting the audio nice and loud. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. So you were saying
I see.
basically that it opens a floodgate.
Right.
Right. So if you see this one thing with your own eyes, and so now you know, well, this is true because I have seen it.
I've observed it.
I've observed it, and that means possibly all these.
The other stuff has credibility too. And it completely changes your whole perspective on the world and life and death and everything, that there's this additional existence that can be communicated with, you know, above and beyond our tactile experience, you know. It's so
above and
interesting.
beyond our material experience.
Right,
I'm just
exactly.
translating if anybody listened to the earlier episodes about materialism, that's what Martin's referring to. There's something beyond.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay, and so if we can circle back a couple of things, you said you have a scientific background. And so part of the reason, just hang on, part of the reason I'm doing this show is because I also was really entrenched in the sciences, and the way that you are taught or trained to think, I think has value. But there's this entire secondary kind of, no good scientist would ever believe in animal communication. And so my question is, did you kind of always believe that sort of thing, or was there a moment when you were like, oh, whoa?
I was very critical of it, and I just kind of joined it just because well, what the heck, I want to learn,
And how old were you then, about?
30.
30.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I went in being very critical, and I'm like, yeah, really, you're looking at
skeptical, you might say.
You're looking at photographs and communicating with an animal, or an animal's passed away, and you're communicating with it. Yeah, okay, yeah. I'm not buying it. It's fun to watch, but I'm not buying it. But then by taking the class, I saw a lot of things that I just couldn't. I mean, they read my dog, and they described what I did with him. They described him as a puppy. They described the whole inside of my house.
Whoa.
And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is so interesting, and there's like 3 of them that got a hit on my dog, and they were just popping things off, and I was just like, and just really specific things about how my front room was, because my dog was in, and they were describing the front room in my house, where everything was, and I'm just like.
So in this is also, which we'll talk more about later, but in the same skill set, what you're describing is remote viewing, right? The sense that they've never seen this place.
Right.
They're getting the information somehow in their particular specialty, let's call it, or ability or capacity. They receive information most effectively through animals. Right. And so I think that that's an interesting thing to think about, in the way that all different people maybe have different orientations, right, to receive from animals, or from meditation, or from whichever
I
method.
would say after talking to several students, they all have a sense that they have extra perception, but how that works out, what it works with, whether it's viewing or communicating, or empathy or telepathy, communicating with people or communicating with animals, it varies between all the different students, and each one of the, watching this group and kind of having the instructor help, because the instructor would help you understand what you were feeling, because like if you felt pain in a certain part of your body, you felt a warmth, cold, colors, different things, you can interpret that to pain or happiness or sadness or whatever, in what you're feeling when you're looking at an animal, or when you run your hand over them or whatever. And the instructor would help you understand what you're feeling, and it would be different with different people. Some people just are really visual, and they just see it.
Yeah.
And others were just like, I just really feel like he's got pain in his hip. I feel warmth.
Just know somehow.
Yeah. I feel a warmth, and they're like, yeah, he's got hip cancer,
Wow.
Yeah, really
So
strange.
in the class, what amount of people would you say had a success at one point or another? Maybe not repeatedly, but were able to do this, where they access, you said that for you, maybe it only happened one time, but that's still non-zero, which I think is worth noting. And so of the people that were in the class, if you remember, I know it was a long time ago, but was it rare, or was it most people?
It bounced around. It was not predictable. One person get hit, another person, 2 people
But
would get
of
hit.
the total people,
Was there some people that were in the lead?
Yeah.
I can tell you it wasn't me.
Yeah.
I was, for just one moment, I was a hero. But yeah, so there were probably 2 or 3 students really kind of were feeling a knack for it. And then
most people, would you say, got one?
No, some people didn't get any.
Some people didn't get any. So it really is kind of a real bell curve. Would you say, or something similar, where there's some people who aren't getting any, some people who are getting a lot, and then people like you who maybe get 1, or some people get 2 or something. Yeah.
Exactly.
And so sort of like other capacities we could think of in, your propensity for being good at math, or something that's more concrete, right? Most of those things kind of fall on some type of distribution.
Right.
So what you're saying is, this seemed like a skill like other skills. where some people had maybe more of a natural
Yes.
proclivity and other people less so.
I would say that. But from what I observed,
Yeah.
some people are just naturals at it. They're
Yeah.
really good at it. They have abilities that are different from other people. And then everybody else, almost everybody else, had some mix of it, had caught different degrees of sensations and so forth, but they weren't strong enough, or they weren't able to interpret them, but they could still feel them.
Yeah.
And, it's like, kind of the thing I always say is like when your dog comes up to you and he's smiling and he's happy, and you just feel happiness,
Yeah. Yes.
it's like that's actually,
Mosquito.
yeah,
Gotcha.
that's actually happening.
Yes.
You're actually sensing that happiness in addition to, seeing the dog smile or whatever, but you're feeling the happiness, and if you
The
just,
transmission of emotion.
yes, and if
Yeah.
you just kind of just take a moment to appreciate that and just go, I'm actually feeling the emotion of this, of my dog, and then the more you do it, the more you start, when you see somebody that's happy or whatever, you do something that makes somebody happy, and you feel that happiness just in your core.
Yeah.
It's actually you, like I said, empathically kind of receiving some of this information. That happens to everybody,
Yeah.
but
Yes.
different people just have it more than others.
Yeah. Right. Well, we are in the backyard. And we are getting eaten by mosquitoes. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also maybe we'll see if we ever report back on this or not.
Yeah.
But Martin and I have a little hypothesis that potentially our dogs are communicating telepathically.
It's incredible.
There's some interesting evidence.
As soon as they
for
start
this.
walking from 3 blocks away, they start walking toward my house, my dog goes bonkers.
Yeah.
You
So
know?
we're still conducting that little study,
Yeah.
but we'll
Yeah.
we'll see. We'll report back either
I
way
know,
how
I know.
it works
It's
out.
fun to pay attention to.
Yeah, it is. Well, thank
Okay.
you so much,
Sure,
Martin.
absolutely.
If you want to say bye. Bye. So I hope you'll agree this is pretty amazing stuff. And at the end here, as we're getting into thinking about whether his and my dog are telepathic together, I wanted to briefly speak to the work of Rupert Sheldrake, who is a Cambridge scientist and actually has one of the only banned TED Talks called The Science Delusion, which is about our pesky friend scientism. And he also wrote a book called When Dogs Know Their Owners Are Coming Home, about this idea that some dogs seem to know when their owners are coming home. In this study, Sheldrake conducted over 100 videotaped experiments of a dog named JT, a little terrier. JT seemed to know exactly when his owner was headed home and waited by the door right when she made the decision to return. And so through these experiments, they ruled out all other possible phenomena like smell or the sound of the car. They'd have her come home in different vehicles at different times, stay out for different lengths of time. Sometimes even she didn't know when she was going to come back because Rupert would randomize the time and then send her a message on a beeper to tell her when she should go home. And what they found was that the dog would wait by the window only 4% of the time when the owner was not coming home, but a whopping 78% of the time when she was, in fact, on her way home. So you might be thinking this isn't that impressive if it's just one dog, but Rupert Sheldrake and his colleagues did another series of experiments where they called people on the phone who owned dogs and asked them if they had experienced this. They called people in 4 different neighborhoods, 2 in the UK and 2 in the US, and asked them if they had had these kinds of experiences of their dog somehow knowing when they were coming home. Here's the statistic on that study. So over 1,200 phones answered of humans who are in close relationship with these dogs, and between 45 and 61% of those who answered the phone said, yes, I've had that kind of experience. 45 to 61, depending on the neighborhood. The total average was 51%. I don't think 51% is a rare occurrence by anyone's metrics. And you could maybe say, oh, probably some of those people were lying, or they wanted to believe this, or they're confused or misinterpreting the dog's actions. But sure, maybe that's true. Maybe some people are doing that. But then on the same side, there are probably many people who don't have someone there to observe the dog's behavior, who live alone or so on. So in summary, this is not just Martin and I who think perhaps our dogs are telepathic. There are many, many instances of this across recorded history. Another fun one is that the Queen of England is very close with her dogs, and all of the staff there reports that they always know when the Queen is coming home because all of her dogs start barking and going off. So kind of a reputable one. In the Soviet Union, in the 20s and 30s, there were two researchers who were teamed up with a circus animal trainer named Vladimir Durov. And Durov had become famous for his abilities to mentally communicate with animals as part of the circus. And together, these researchers conducted nearly 1,300 experiments. And Durov would mentally, without words, non-verbally, transmit simple commands like walk to the left corner or fetch the black cap, while remaining silent and motionless. And these dogs, who had no prior training in these tasks, would carry them out with incredible degrees of accuracy. And toward the end of this study, one of the researchers asked the dog telepathic communicator to conduct an experiment on him. And so the researcher says, compel me mentally to make some movement. I am curious to know what I will think in the process. Right? So at this point, the researcher is convinced this is real because he's watching this guy do this with these dogs over and over. And so he says, can you do it on me? Easily, Durov replied. You just sit quietly. Durov wrote a command on a paper. The two men sat silently, locking eyes. Moments later, the researcher automatically scratched behind his right ear. The command Durov had written on the paper, scratch behind your right ear. And so these experiments originally were conducted in a spirit of curiosity and wonder. But as tensions rose between the Soviet Union and the West, interest in telepathy shifted toward military implementations, and declassified CIA documents reveal that by the 1960s, Soviet scientists were testing psychic communication over long distances and under extreme conditions, one of which involved baby bunnies. So they would have the mother bunny, and the baby bunnies would be put on a submarine, sent out in the submarine, and electrocuted to death. Sorry, I should have given a warning. I'm about to talk about baby bunnies dying in a submarine because of Russian experiments. So they would electrocute the baby bunnies to death while the mother, still on shore, so very far from her babies, had electrodes connected to her brain. And the researchers recorded sharp responses of EEG activity in the mother's brain, suggesting that some kind of instantaneous, non-local communication across miles and through water and steel. That's awesome. It's not awesome that they were killing baby bunnies. That's terrible. But the idea that these kinds of things are possible feels important and exciting. And it was so exciting that Martin and I couldn't stop talking even after I pushed the stop button. So we've got one more little nugget for you here.
All right, we're back at it again.
Yeah. So we were going to be done, but then Martin started telling more of the stories. We're going to tell just a little more here. So
this is just another brief little experience with it in the class. I was having people read my dog, and my dog had gotten away. And
in a field, he said.
In a field, I was on the open space, and he chased a coyote and he just disappeared. It was during sunset and stuff. I didn't have a cell phone, and I was literally just stuck there doing compass coordinates, just yelling his name and just rotating and yelling it again. And I kept going and going and going, and then finally, like after an hour, he finally showed up, and I feel something poking me in the hand, and he's standing right behind me, just comes up and nudges me, so that in itself was a really interesting experience. I was up on the hill. There was farm equipment all around. But in the class, when
In the animal
in my animal
communication
communication class,
yeah.
one of the students described that event almost in perfect detail.
Whoa.
It was amazing. I mean, they
And
just,
there was no way they could have known.
no, not a chance. And they're
Yeah.
just describing, I just feel like, there's something happened, like you ran away or something, and you were like standing on top of this hill yelling for them, and there was like farm equipment that was right next to you. You could see. I'm like, that's absolutely correct. I don't know where you're coming up with this stuff.
How
But-
did that feel like in that moment to have it happen to you where someone is telling you your own life?
I felt like I really did not understand the world around me.
Yeah.
I thought-
But does it feel like scary or hopeful or?
it was just amazing. I just thought it was amazing. It just to see something like that happening to make me feel like there's more out there.
Yeah.
It was, like I said, it's just so cool. I can't explain it. It goes against, what I think is, science and so forth. But yet at the same time, it was just truly amazing. And sometimes wonderment is satisfying. You
Yes.
can't explain it, but it was certainly cool to experience
It
it.
is satisfying, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Now this time we're really leaving.
Yeah, we're really going.
Bye.
Until we walk another 10 feet
Yeah.
come up with another story.
And so, with that, I want to thank my neighbor, Martin, for having the courage and open heartedness to share his story. I feel like I've won the neighbor lottery. And also, just what a kind and beautiful human this is, that you may all be inspired, not only in what is possible in communication with animals and communication with other humans, but what it's possible to be like in the world. And I'll maybe add one more thing, which is I was talking to a friend on the phone the other day, and he said, why are you doing this? Like, why are you spending hours and hours of your free time yapping into your phone? Well, why do you do this? And I thought about it, and it's because I really believe that this matters. If these things are true, that we are communicating mind to mind, and as we'll get into in later episodes, if our intention is capable of controlling or modifying the outputs of random number generators, of changing the speed of plant growth, if our focused intention is capable of communicating with animals and other human beings, isn't that something worth caring about? Doesn't that have implications for the way we all give and offer our attention? I believe it does. And so, I hope you can feel the love I am sending to each and every one of you right now. From my heart to yours, thank you for tuning in to something else entirely.